Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm the host, Tyler Schatz, hoping I too have King's blood running through my veins. Joining me are Mr. Stephen Howard,
the avid Westeros partygoer,
Amanda Howard,
I'm Amanda,
Nick Castillo,
We're all being shipped to hell together.
and last but certainly not least, Gary Delaney.
The cock-blocking hero of the revolution.
Oh wow.
Oh,
Right off.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Just keep going. Don't give him the satisfaction. Just keep going.
We can't encourage him because then he'll keep going.
That's what she said.
So here we are to discuss episode 7 and episode 8 of season 3. Episode 7, The Bear and the Maiden Fair, and episode 8 was Second Sons. So jumping right into episode 7, The Bear and the Maiden Fair. Here's the synopsis from IMDb. Jon and the wildlings travel south of the wall. Talisa tells Robb that she's pregnant. Arya runs away from the Brotherhood. Daenerys arrives at Yunkai, and Jaime leaves Brienne behind at Harrenhal. So, to be honest, I don't have all that much notes for these two episodes. They were a lot of, like, what I would want to call, like, plot moving episodes, but there was like a lot of talking that happened, but, like, it wasn't really, I don't want to say not important, because it's obviously important to the overall story that's going on, but it just felt like it's just episodes to kind of keep the plot moving forward here. So, I guess the one thing I'd want to talk about here kind of happens right away, I think, in episode 7 there with the council in Riverrun is talking about kind of the plans for the Frey's wedding there. And I kind of picked up on this. So obviously, House Tully and the Starks all kind of look down upon, or maybe even most of Westeros looks down upon House Frey there just because of what they are, the fact that they've had Walder Frey basically running the house since forever, and he's got all these children and bastards underneath him. And Edmure, I think, utters the line here that he's the best match that House Frey will have had in basically like their history of their house. And it feels like, watching the scene a little bit there, Robb kind of displays a bit of arrogance and cockiness that, oh yeah, this plan of instead of marrying me off to one of the Freys, it will be Edmure, which will be just as fine as me. So I was kind of wondering if anyone else kind of picked up on that or kind of read into like that little scene there of it just being like, we're better than the Freys here. They will accept this and just kind of take it as is.
I feel like this last couple episodes, as you've seen Robb, it's sort of a foreshadowing of like making him a lot less likable, like making him sort of definitely a lot less likable, and definitely proof that the plot's trying to move in a direction where like his chickens are going to come home to roost.
yeah, I entirely agree. I think that he is becoming very. It's not self-confident. He's always been self-confident. He's become, and there's Gary, there's a $5 word for this, and I'm forgetting it, and I won't say it just for you. He's a lot more big-headed. He honestly believes he is right in just about every way. He is going to succeed in every way, and as long as other people don't mess it up, he's going to do fine. But as long as other people don't mess it up, everything will be all right.
Yeah, I was going to say high on his own supply. Like little, like when he first started off, he did a good job of being coached and listening to the people, his advisors around him. You know, he never started off and said, I'm going to be king of the North. It was kind of everyone around him, and then he kind of rode that popularity and that boon. And then the more battles he won, he seems to be more and more, even in these last couple episodes. You probably talked about it in the last recording too, but like more and more it's the decisions he's making on his own, like his justice to the Karstarks, his own decisions about what's going to happen here with Edmure. It's kind of, I'm in charge, I am king, and less listening to his would-be subjects and more making his own decisions, which, yeah, I agree. Sometimes you see the pride before the fall.
I would say
I would
also,
agree with that.
outside of Karstark, you also see a lot less of the Northmen that had names in, like, when he went off to war, which is an assumption that they've all died or fucked off. Like,
Yeah.
because I can't remember who the big burly guy who got his fingers bitten off. I don't know where he went.
It's Big John Umber, wasn't it?
Big John Umber.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Like you're definitely right. They've started more and more whittling down the lieutenants around him, the named people around him, pretty much. Now it's basically just been, especially since they got to River Run, it's basically been his mom is still there in basically the council sessions for whatever reason, and then her mom's brother, Brendan Tully, is it the Blackfish basically, and then Edmure Tully is there as well.
It's as if figuratively his, support is dwindling.
Or even maybe like his circle of trust or whatever too is like,
Council. His small council.
yeah, his council is slowly dwindling there too. Yeah.
I feel like as his mission is kind of disintegrated, so is like his trusted advisors.
Love is the death of duty.
Do you think he's kind of lost sight of why? And we've talked about this leading up to this several times. Do you think he is basically at this point entirely lost sight of what he is doing, why he is doing, and where basically he is doing?
I would say that his dad had been in a great war, but he had never experienced a great, long, protracted war. Protracted?
Yep.
And so I think he doesn't realize, like, in the beginning, like, he's just winning battles, and then in the long run, as the war's gotten longer, it's like he needs to keep his lieutenants happy and, like, feel like they're valuable, and also not let his mother, fuck up all the plans. So
I would say be careful with the comparison between though Ned and his son Rob, because Ned was raised in House Aaron, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. You've got a little bit more, or Amanda or Steven there.
I think so, something like that.
He was raised in House Aaron with Robert Baratheon there, basically, where they learned the art of, I want to say, fighting and stuff like that, and kind of everything along with that there. So, and that whereas Rob basically grew up in Winterfell, where obviously he learned from the Master of Arms of Winterfell of fighting and maybe some basic stuff. But I think Rob maybe just had the better mind for being tactician and got, I don't want to say got lucky. That's not really it, because he had the mind for battle there. But then obviously, as we've discussed throughout these episodes here, the long-term vision of what he was doing just gradually grew less and less clear as time went on there.
I was just going to point out really quick, too. I'm not sure on the exact timeline, but I think for clarification's sake, Ned was given River Run's daughter, Catelyn Tully, pretty much after the war, as like a congratulations, thank you for your support. And Rob was, and I just spaced Baratheon. Robert was given Cersei. And so really, like I keep thinking love is the death of duty thing. It wasn't like Catelyn was right by Ned Stark after each battle too. I think a lot of these episodes kind of show Selyse right next to Rob, and for good or ill, it's kind of like, well, she's talking to him about what he should do, or not coaxing him maybe in the right direction that we would think as well. And there's some disillusion as far as trying to find out what his purpose is in having someone he cares about so closely to him and not keeping his eye on the ball with what is really at stake should he fail.
he's a sweet summer child. Also, when you mentioned like where Ned grew up, it actually kind of reminded me of something random. Is that Ned was probably the second son was sent off to the Eyrie, whereas the first son, the heir apparent to Winterfell, his brother Brandon,
I think Brandon.
and his father were burned alive by the Mad King. So I just put that together. I was like, oh, well, that's kind of crazy to think about. That like, how did he become the Lord of Winterfell? Is because his dad and the next heir apparent were murdered. So that's why he wasn't being taught in Winterfell. Is that, in all assumptions, they probably didn't ever think he was going to be the Lord of Winterfell. They thought he was going to be the Lord of a Holdfast.
I'm wondering too, and this is off of what Nick was saying, if maybe, and I am giving Elisa, or what is her name? Elisa?
I think it's
Elisa?
Celise. Or
Elise.
Elisa, sorry.
Talise.
That's something else.
Lisa, yeah.
T.
Whatever her
Rob
name is.
Stark's wife, right?
Talisa, yeah. T.
Talisa, yeah.
Talisa Mager.
I do think that a lot of this might come down from the fact that Rob has these comforts on the battlefield now that make it almost bearable, should we say, or okay, it's nice. He doesn't have to hurry. And that's kind of one of the things that on a battlefield, you're going to want. You don't want to strip everything away from everyone, but you also don't want to perpetuate a feeling of what's the word I'm looking for here? Contentness. You don't want to be content, and I feel like he is very content. He is his personal life is looking way up, and when you're content, you're not going to be trying to push forward as much as you want.
I thought I could have sworn he was married to Ned was married to Catelyn beforehand, because I thought Rob was like, she presented him with a son and he presented her with Jon Snow.
Yeah, maybe that could be. I couldn't remember the timeline.
Sure. Either way, I think Gary has an interesting point that like Ned Stark's father and brother were burned alive by the Mad King, and he and Robert went off to war. Rob, his father, was killed by Joffrey, and he went off to war, but he had the closest thing he would have had is Theon, other than Robert Baratheon, and that partnership like fell up. That did not work out for him. It's an interesting
perspective.
So I kind of wonder here too. So speaking of Talise being so close to Rob, there in the show she is portrayed as a foreigner, whereas in the book she was a Lannister. They're basically an offshoot of the Lannister family there. So I wonder if they're trying to make the connection here of, obviously Rob's probably listening to her slightly more than he really should, and her being a foreigner might not be privy to the way of the what's the word I'm looking for here?
intricacies.
That's it. Yep. Of the different houses and families and stuff like that. So, she doesn't know Walter Frey there. So she thinks, oh yeah, he should be fine to kind of turn around and accept this other offer that we're going to give her. She doesn't know the Lannisters and how brutal they can be. See the Reigns of Castamere, So she maybe doesn't have the big picture, and she's maybe somewhat too leading Rob astray there. And I'm not trying to say it's her fault, because I still think a lot of it falls on Rob's fault there, basically, of why things kind of seem to be not necessarily turning south for him at this point in time, but things just don't seem to be going the way they should for him. But I wonder if if they're trying to show that she's somewhat contributing to that as well.
I just had a small anecdote I was going to raise my finger to as well, on something that Steven said about the contentness of having all your creature comforts at home or there out in the field. It's a little bit of having something worth fighting for, or what are we fighting for? What I want to get back to home, or I want to get back to, my significant other's, embrace. That falls short if you're like, oh shoot, well after this battle she's right over there. It's not really that much of a stretch or that much to fight for. So he's making decisions based on what would help him win the war, not necessarily what would help him keep his troops alive. Because in any battle, you're going to have hard decisions to make and people are going to die. That's what battle is. But you want to make the best tactical decision where your forces are not depleted. And those situations are better made when the gravity of how dangerous and how final it is if people don't make it back.
Do you think that Rob's wife should have been sent to Winterfell? Because now she's a Stark, and by all rights, but is that maybe twisted up because they don't have Winterfell anymore?
I
Like,
agree with that. I was going to say
exactly.
it
Proper-
was good, but
Her proper place in the war was probably that her and Catelyn go back to Winterfell, and Catelyn customize her to like the ways of being the High Lady of the North, like similar to, I think it's in like the first episode where they're going over with one of the smaller Starks about like all these houses and what's their sigil and like all of that. Like, I honestly think that was probably the mistake, is that the safest place for Catelyn Stark is in Winterfell, because she obviously shouldn't be trusted on the battlefield, but as the Lady of Winterfell, she's where she would be the most value, and that's being a strong pillar of the North.
So I agree that there is probably a little confusion. I have 2 points here. I agree there's a little confusion on where she belongs, probably with Rob as well, but I doubt, even if they had Winterfell, I don't think he'd send her back. No way. He doesn't seem to understand that this baggage train he has going on with all these basically house routine servants with him doesn't necessarily belong every single place he goes. And I think even if he held Winterfell, sorry, there'd be no way he'd send her back. Just like he's not going to send back his mother, even if he had Winterfell. No way. And then a little bit to just to add on to Nick's point as well. The other thing, when you lose creature comforts, you are more urgent about what you want. And there is no urgency in what I can see right now. He had all the urgency in the world to start this fight, and I don't see any urgency now.
Something that you were just mentioning that made me think of something else too. For comparison, the Lannister army has never had all of their lieutenants, their people important, in one area at once. Maybe for a brief bit at Harrenhal, where we see Tywin talking to all of his colonels, his generals. Like, the Starks and Robb have everybody, including, like we've been talking about, his wife, in the same place everywhere they go. And from a tactical perspective, obviously it's all fantasy and it's pre-drawn out written script, but tactically, that's so not a good idea. If it goes bad once, it's like, that sucks. But thankfully, we're not all in the same place. Like, we're talking about, should we send Catelyn somewhere else, or is it better to send his wife Talise somewhere else? You don't want to ever split the party, but at the same time, having everybody all at once, especially after some of his forces have been depleted recently with things that have happened, I think it opens you up to like one fell swoop, and something bad could happen. It would decimate everything, not just like that would go south quickly.
Do you think the fact that Catelyn shit the bed on trust made it so she couldn't counsel Robb on, hey, Talisa is good, I can see that you're happy, but here's the role she needs to take in our family, because all intents and purposes she is Stark, like she is Kat's daughter-in-law, so that's where, and she just can't accept that. And also, I guess, playing revisionist history, if Catelyn and Talisa were not there, I think the Starks would still be there, because one of their complaints was, you were dragging this foreign something around, and they don't trust their mother. But if you were just sent his mother off to go back to Winterfell, because that's where she wanted to be, like, that's a sign that like his focus truly was on like the battle.
Yep, I entirely agree with your second points there. That if they weren't there, I think this goes differently, and I think it's the morales aspect and the council aspect. I will say, I don't think that his mother would have been a good counsel for his wife one way or another, because she treats his wife like Jon Snow. Like, there's no way she's going to treat her well, and I don't think she's going to give her the quote-unquote necessary advice. Like, you send them again, an anti-historical, like you're saying, but you send them both back to Winterfell together, and she's just going to cold shoulder Talisa the entire time. She's not a for all the purpose he brought her there as a diplomat. She's not good at that. She's not good at forging those type of personal connections.
Rhetorical question, but do we think any woman would have been good enough for her daughter in Catelyn's eye, for her son in Catelyn's eyes?
Yes, she was gonna sell him off to a fray. Like, I don't think
she wanted to go to the Freys, did she? I can't remember that episode, but I thought she was like, "Don't go. I've known Lord Frey since I was a girl."
She did recommend against talking to Frey, but she was the one that negotiated the agreement for it. I don't know. She seems to only like it if it's a perfect idea of the family she wants. Like, as soon as it's not, she does not treat any person outside of that. If she views them as less than worthy, then she treats them like that. Publicly, privately, all. I mean, she didn't like Tyrion. She treated him like that. If she didn't like you, there was no diplomacy in her actions. If she didn't like you, she was going to treat you like that.
I don't think the Starks have much subterfuge ability at all.
I feel like the Freys always exert their toll and so I think at that point, like, I think her children were still in the grasp, so it was the right decision to make. But I think I would like to think that Catelyn was mad about Talisa because it was not only like, did you do something irrational as a child, but you also did something that brings dishonor on the family. Like, it was not, like, honestly, like, she probably wouldn't have been happy with the fray, but it would have been what they agreed upon, so she would make it work. She didn't agree to Talisa. She just, like, sort of showed up. That's all I got.
All right.
Back to you, Tyler.
Well, I didn't think that topic would branch out as much as it did there, but
Hey, we got a lot of stuff on that.
Gary, do you have anything you want to discuss for this episode?
Yes. I actually had 2 conversations that I thought were relevant together, and one was with Tyrion and Bronn, that they talked about, like, oh, well, you could just go up to the north and, like, you would be the ruler of the north until your future child is of age. Like, so, and I think he said, like, and your future child has the ability to be the ruler of not only Casterly Rock, but the north. Like, so your children would be very, very powerful. And until they're at that point, like, you would be a ruler. Now, I think, like, a scene later, you see the conversation between Tywin and Joffrey, and you see very much a power struggle where Tywin is, you know, and going back to that previous conversation, what it brought up was, like, Tywin is ruling through Joffrey in a similar way that, like, he didn't need to be the king. His grandchild's the king, and he can assert force through that. Anyway.
I wrote down on my note about that conversation between Tywin and Joffrey specifically. It's like Tywin is talking to Joffrey. Like, Joffrey's asking all these questions, and Tywin's, like, basically, like, sighing kind of as he's talking to him. He's like, little twerp here. This is what's going on in your kingdom that you're not even bothering to pay attention to. We have this under control. Stop bothering me. I have stuff to do, basically, is what it felt like he was kind of putting out there the entire conversation.
And I think you're entirely right in the relationship between them. Joffrey's king, but his grandfather's the kingmaker. And you can... I think Joffrey even can acknowledge the amount of power that even just his aura, I guess, if you want to call it that, has around Tywin.
Also, I would say that Tywin is trying to set up, as he's somewhat new at this point to King's Landing, he's trying to set up the rules of engagement, or maybe he's been there up a little bit, but basically to say that like the hand runs the country, the king is just a figurehead. Like the king shits and the hand wipes. Like that's all that needs to do. So I think he's trying to set down the precedent that you're still the king. You can still do whatever the fuck you want, but I'm gonna, like, I know better and I'm gonna make things work so that you're successful and your children are successful. Tyler?
I was going to kind of interject with just kind of a history lesson here. So, book readers or Nick, correct me here. Tywin was the hand of the Mad King Aerys for a brief point in time there. And then there was some rift that they basically split up there. Right?
The Mad King kept undermining everything that Tywin would say and do, and point fun about how he's how lucky he is, and how everything works well for Tywin, and he shits gold, and he has Castle Rock, and he's got these two beautiful twins that came out, and everything goes great for him. And then Tyrion is born, and all in one fell swoop, this person he's probably secretly super jealous of is given a tiny little dwarf demon child, and his wife is dead. And Tywin, I believe, is just like mortified beside himself. And the Mad King Aerys has a couple comments like, haha, your wife's dead. Guess you're not so great after all. And Tywin just is like, I'm done. This is ridiculous. We used to be friends and you're an absolute ass. And just up and leaves and goes back to Castle Rock. And that's when he's not come back until the very end, when he brings his troops back into, supposedly help the king back into King's Landing, and ends up sacking the city, and Aerys dies, I believe.
Aerys also appointed Jaime to the
Yes.
Kingsguard, which was against Tywin's wishes because he wants Jaime to be his heir.
Yep.
You can't be an heir.
Correct.
And so that was also, I think, part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting history lesson there. And I guess thinking on it, is Tywin trying to basically change the political structure of the Westeros as we know it? In terms of right now, it is a pretty, I don't want to say standard monarchy, but you have a king, the king rules, and the king decides. And Tywin is really making, like you said, that king into a figurehead. And that, at least to me, and like the history buffs on this in this world can tell me if I'm wrong, but the king has never been a figurehead before this point, at least to me. The
king has always ruled absolutely. It was always whoever is king is the person who's making the decisions, is the person who's deciding what to do. It seems, at least. I don't know. Gary seems to be shaking his head. I'll give you a moment here in a second. But it's interesting that from my perspective. Absolutely, like you said, is he trying to change the political structure? I think so. I mean, he wants someone with strong Lannister blood to be the one making those decisions moving forward. Whether that's a Queen Regent in Cersei, or if somehow Jaime can become king, or be a strong power, or move the seat of power to Lannisport, where the Lannisters are from, on the Westerlands, or to put Tyrion as the Master Coin into so many different, relationships, like with Sansa, or to set up so many different positions of power that they've secured his legacy, because he knows he's mortal, but he wants to try and do what he can to set his children up for success, however that looks.
I would say that Robert Baratheon was a figurehead. He told Ned directly in like the first episode, like, I want you to rule. You don't belong up here in the north. You need to be down in the ruling. And Robert wanted to drink and whore himself to an early grave.
I'll give you that.
That's all Robert wanted. So all Tywin's trying to do is set up that process. Is that like, you just need to have fun. Go drink and whore yourself. Like, I'll take care of the rest. So unlike Nick, I think it is a setup system. Amanda.
I can kind of see it a little bit both ways, because I could see him totally willing to take over this and just rule. On the other hand, Joffrey is supposed to be, 16? Like, he's supposed to be underage. So yes, he might. You could argue that, and we've seen what a great job he's done ruling. Beautiful work, really. Tywin was very impressed with it, as he even sent Tyrion back and said, "You will bring that." I don't remember what insult he called him, but he said, "You will bring him under control, and if necessary, his mother." So I think there could be a little bit of both. I do think it also goes back to his legacy, like Nick was saying. Whatever is gonna, I think he'd be willing to just be Lord of Casterlock as long as he's got his legacy under control. He wants the most glory. He was fine with Jaime. He even said covering himself with glory by winning battles in the field. I think he's okay with ruling through Joffrey, but I think he's also, I mean, I don't mind if he rules through Joffrey right now. Joffrey's kind of a interesting.
He's reined him in to an extent.
Yeah. Well, I kind of have a counterpoint to Gary there, and that is, I very I very much think that oh my God, I'm remembering Storm's End, but I'm not remembering the dang king's name. What's his name?
Robert Baratheon.
Robert.
Thank you, Robert Baratheon. Should be easy to remember, but it's not.
King
Robert Baratheon did rule, and the way you can see that he did rule was that there was no other focus of who made decisions in the kingdom. The hands switched often. The even the Littlefinger, who controlled all the coin, just borrowed to spend what Robert wanted.
True.
All policy decisions came from Robert, at least from what I can tell. Everyone just did what he wanted. Robert just had no idea what he wanted. Well, I mean, he knew what he wanted. He wanted the whore and drink and hunt.
Fair point. Nick?
Yeah, just to tie on to that, that's probably more where I was thinking of, to parry part of what Stephen was saying. It was a terrible king, a terrible reign under Robert. But yeah, he knew what he wanted to go do, and whatever he wanted to go do was what he kind of just decided to go do. Whereas I think if, as horrifying to imagine as it could be, if Joffrey truly wanted to do whatever he wanted to do, like everybody would be dead and the whole place would be in shambles. And so I think to some extent that's more the figurehead I thought of, where yes, the hand and the people around him are trying to counsel and actually run the kingdom. But there's, in that perspective, definitely more allowance, more in what the king really is trying to do and would like to do, that Robert got to go do, like we said, whore and drink himself into an early grave, versus what Joffrey would actually like to go do.
All right. Gary, were those your points for the episode there?
I had many, many more points.
Okay.
I also made a note about Daenerys receiving the Lord of Yunkai, or the head Lord of Yunkai, and about how, I thought it was interesting that the line of Unsullied that his whole party had to walk through is, I think intended to be very, very intimidating. That not we're going to receive you in, and my army's just camped over there, and they'll keep me safe. No, you're going to have to walk past a crap load of soldiers. And then the dragons were there, and the dragons were there for intimidation. And then their offer to her was, we'll give you some ships as long as you get the fuck out. Just stay out of our business. Her offer back is, they need to free all the slaves, and she will give you your life. Tyler?
I was just going to point out, too, that her name is starting to get longer and longer, too, now, because Missandei introduced her, and it's on and on and on and on and stuff like that, so something to point out.
Does it shorten at some point? Not being a spoiler or anything, did it shorten at some point? I think it always stays way fucking long.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of this season, there is a shortening. There's a one word that...
Oh, yeah.
I'd be interested to know this. You'll have to circle back to that. Anyway, that was what I thought was an interesting scene about intimidation and like, because obviously this lord came out as a very prim and proper dude, and then just like she's just accepting it and just tell him to fuck off. Anyway, Steven.
Yeah, so I also wanted to kind of parry on that as well, because I think you're right, but I think that's what all diplomatic negotiations, especially before a battle, are. You have to intimidate. You have to show the strength of your forces, because I mean that's what you want to do. You want to win without blood. That's what Sun Tzu said, that I believe, or something like that. The win without fighting is the greatest victory. Blah blah blah. I mean, go rate it yourself, but that's I could easily see where she's coming from. She wants to look terrifying. She wants to look intimidating, and she wants Yunkai to think that they don't have any option to survive, or it's only give in or survive. I was also wondering how you guys felt about her, and I'm of two minds here. Just basically becoming a raider herself and going city to city, just attacking cities, just taking what she wants. And I mean, I can't fault her for exactly what. So here's the thing: I can't fault the end result. I am, and we got to. I said this before. I'm all fine with burning Atlanta. It's nothing that's ever going to be a problem with me. But there has to be a reason, I would feel, to start those hostilities, and it feels like she has no real reason besides she wants to burn Atlanta.
I would say that she's trying to she's trying to get back to the to Westeros, but along the way, as she runs into these new cities, she's like, "Oh, well, I just don't like slavery. Like, I can't work with people if there's slavery." And I think her assumption is that they were going to let loose all their slaves. The slaves are going to be free, and then she could diplomatically work with this organization. But and maybe there's some illusions that she felt like she was a slave in season 1. She was sold off to Khal Drogo for an army, and so every time she sort of just doesn't like that feeling of people being enslaved or given away their humanity.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Stephen, what you said was, she's kind of a raider herself? Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to come to your city, work my will upon you because of the might of the people beside me, and then, if I don't like it, I'm going to kill you all. We have the outside perspective to be like, well, we didn't know the thousands and throngs of people who have just got murdered, so we're okay with it, because the end result is, yay, people are liberated. And, we obliterate all the people who are, that was their way of life, or the millions of people that those families were tied to, and it's, yeah. So I think absolutely she's a very dangerous threat, and just because, the ends justify the means. It's what she's able to walk away with and what she's doing, but at the same time, she is destroying an entire region's economy, making a power vacuum.
Yes.
She does seem to be purely going off of her experiences, like the Targaryen legacy and the exposure to the Dothraki. Is that rating, is that take what I want, this is because I have the power. And that she still was basically a slave herself. Her brother totally sold her. He had no illusions about what use she was to him. So, it's weird how she takes it, like, I'm going to raid this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to do this. But also, slavery's bad. It's free the slaves. It's purely off of her personal experiences only.
I was just going to make a snarky comment that she's spreading her own form of justice across the world there, like some other country tends to do every so often here.
Is she a hero of the revolution?
Well, Gary, you'll tell us that.
That's all I have.
Is that all you have for the episode then, too, Gary?
Oh, what was your question, Tyler?
Do you have anything else?
Oh, I had the song in the end credits. The
Bear
lady
of the Maiden Fair.
The Bear in the Maiden Fair. In the end credits is the same song. It's an instrumental that Bran sung on the sacking of King's Landing. It's the same song. I can't remember what we talked about it. I thought it was related to the Lannisters.
The Reigns of Castamere?
The Bear and the Maiden Fair. The Reigns of Castamere is related to Lannisters. The Bear and the Maiden Fair is like a folk song that's sung around the place.
That was maybe what it was. It was The Bear and the Maiden Fair is the song that plays on the way out of the episode.
And I have to give the show credit because I do remember references to that song in the book, and I think there was probably even verses in there. That's a long cry from actually having like song. Like they put a good tune to it. It's catchy.
Yeah.
That
Anyway,
happens in part of the episode, and they make reference to it in the end credits song. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Mm-hmm. Did a good job of that.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. Somebody got it.
All right. So you good now, Gary? Here you covered everything? All right. Thumbs up from Gary here. Amanda, what do you got for us?
Before Jamie departed Harrenhal from Brienne, I noticed that he said that he owed her debt, and she asked him just, when Catelyn Stark released you, we promised just return the girls to their mother. I'll consider it paid. And he swears this after we've seen his reaction before to like how they make you swear so many oaths. Like he voluntarily takes this one. It's a huge step for him, considering how many other oaths he's been forced to do, and he's pointed out how you can't keep all of these. I thought it was a really good scene.
So I have to ask here too. My memory is a little fuzzy on this. If this is touched on in the show or if it's touched on the books or both. Jamie also swears an oath to Catelyn that he would never raise his sword against a Stark or their bannerman ever again, too, right? As part
He does in the book.
It's in the book.
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't remember that from the show.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if that was touched on in the show then as part of the other thing that he swears there to Brienne. And then kind of to expand on your scene a little bit further here, I didn't know if you were going to touch on this or not too. There's a part at the end of the scene there where Brienne calls Jamie Sir Jamie as basically a great sign of respect there, and you can just see it in his eyes. He lights up a little bit there because he feels like for once now he's getting respected by a peer, basically.
That's a good point. I do agree, because later on he's out there talking to, what's his name, Qyburn? And Qyburn's like, well, how many people have you ever saved? And he's like, 500,000. Population of King's Landing. Before he told that story to Brienne, we had not heard of it. Suddenly he's more comfortable saying this. And I feel like she kind of gave him that validation.
Yeah, great point there too. I never made that connection that that's probably why he was able to express that thought to Qyburn. Do you have anything else for us then, Amanda?
No.
Okay.
After Gary's list, how can I compete with that?
Yeah, I know Gary pretty much covered most of the episode there. Steven, do you got anything?
On that note, Gary actually hit the one that I wanted to talk about, and that was the negotiations with Yunkai, should we say.
Okay. Nick, what do you got?
Nothing, actually. He touched on the different points I had, too. I didn't have many for this episode.
Okay. So I just remembered why I have this written down here for my point. I think I've got just two final things to kind of cover here. One of them's more of a discussion here. There's a scene where Tyrion and Shay have a conversation after it is revealed that Tyrion is going to marry Sansa Stark there. And something about Shay's character, the way she kind of comes off, is always kind of, I don't want to say rubbed me the wrong way, but it always seems like it's just, I don't know how to quite say it. It seems like somebody who just doesn't get it. Like she's not understanding. She's being too independent, maybe is the wrong word there too. But Tyrion's explaining to her, no, I have to marry Sansa. This is what is being commanded to me. This is how everything works. and she's just so argumentative with him and everything, and he's trying to, and I'm not saying too that he's perfect and all this either here too, but he's trying to kind of express it to her, but maybe also the problem is he's just doing a bad job of expressing what's kind of going on to her that she can understand, since I don't think you ever learn where she's from, but it's always kind of hinted at that she's not really from Westeros either there too. So what do you got, Steven?
So I think that you're right, and I think that a little bit comes down to who Shay is, and I feel like we really get attached to Shay watching her and reading about her, and well, I guess some people do at least, but like she's witty, she has these clever little things. She always seems kind of like a nicest person, and we got to realize she's putting on a show that entire time, and she's kind of wheeling us in. She's in this for herself. And she doesn't see, I mean, you're right. Tyrion has to do this, and I think she might even understand that. It doesn't make it any less of a threat to her position. And I think that's where it comes down to, is she feels threatened.
I like the character of Shay better than she's kind of a combination of characters in the book anyway, but the character in the book is a very, very different personality. I enjoy watching this one more, but it does drive me nuts how much she's arguing with him about, like, considering she is not a highborn person, she would be so used to the fact that lords and anyone powerful, they rule your entire life. They rule all the small people's lives. So I can't, it just keeps blowing my mind how she's like, oh, he doesn't run everything. I'm like, have you heard of this man? Yes, he does.
Okay, I actually am rewatching this episode and a couple other episodes. Knowing some future plot threads, in Shay's story, I started to question that conversation in a very different way. And we get to those future plot threads, we can talk about it. Just remind me, because I'll forget. But there's some other things going on in this conversation. So, anyway. That was what Tyler mentioned this, and that was what I was picking up, is like, maybe there's more going on here. Maybe Shay's playing the Game of Thrones. Either you win or you die.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I do. I think you're right.
Anyway, Tyler.
All right, and then the final point I was going to touch on, and I can't believe in Gary's long list of stuff he talked about there, we didn't touch on the hero of the revolution's one glorious scene.
I even made the little scissors, thing.
We don't have to talk about this scene at all, but let's just say the
You
hero
just cut that scene out.
We're going to cut that scene off, actually, here.
Oh!
I feel like, thinking of it specifically a viewer on the initial watch of that scene and the rewatch, you already know that things are going to shit at the beginning, and you know it's coming. Bad wordplay. But it's just like, it makes it even more uncomfortable on a rewatch. Because that initial watch, you're like, what is going on here? Like, maybe they're not going to be so mean to him. Maybe some people are taking pity on him. And then you realize it's all just a cruel fucking game to, like, bring him up to, like, forgetting that he's in prison and just fucking slamming the door in his face. Like, it is... Oh, it's very good from a building a scene, a filmmaking. Very good filmmaking. That's a sad fucking thing to say. Nick?
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the points I really gleaned from what you just said too is, like, when you watch it the first time, you don't know, so you still kind of have that hope that maybe this is going to end well. But yeah, again, I missed the last week's episode, but the hero of the revolution does make that comment again. Like, if you think this has a happy ending, you're not paying attention. And so paying attention on the rewatch, like we said, we're picking up some of these little nuances and things in the conversations and the importance of these earlier dialogue scenes. like you watch that again and you're like, no, this is already he's tortured him so much. We see he's like gleefully doing it. He's not like trying to find a breaking point for Theon, right? Like he's just doing it because he can. Totally cat and mouse. And yeah, it's even worse than because you get the intent and the malice in his intent in doing it.
Also, on a rewatch, you know that one of the two girls in that scene has a name that's explain a much deeper storyline moving forward. So on a rewatch, you're like, that person looks familiar. Where do I recognize that person from? So
the depths that
yes,
some of these people.
It is a very cruel scene, but still think he's the hero of Revolution. He's gonna make waves. He's gonna make waves. He's gonna give the North a clean shave.
He's gonna. Oh my God!
Scary.
This is the painful conversation.
Line in the sand, hurtled.
Tyler, back to you.
Like I do remember when I last reread the books, when I got to these scenes, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read like a word out of every paragraph. Nope, we're still there. I don't need to. It's worse to rewatch it.
Oh,
It's one of those ones that it doesn't wear off. Like you can't rewatch it.
Right.
And I think it really impacts the sadism that our hero really has, because I think Joffrey is a sadistic, and I think that he likes to torture and kill people, even though Gary loves him.
We're not talking about Joffrey. We're talking about the hero of Revolution.
No. I know. I think this guy is legitimately the most sadistic person in the entirety of everything. He outdoes Joffrey by leaps and bounds, and this type of thing, like, I don't think Joffrey could have conceived of giving someone hope and then snipping it off. This is just it's painful. It's so painful.
Is it also that he's older? The hero of Revolution is probably 18, 19?
Okay, when I was 18 or 19, I would not have come up with a plot to bring two naked hot women in front of a guy that I was going to snip off his junk.
He just wants to impress his father, who hasn't been introduced yet. So, but you don't know that.
I would think.
Tyler's nodding. He got my explanation of about impressing the father.
I'm picking up what you're putting down there, Gary, about that point.
Yeah.
I would wager, people who get my alignment references, Joffrey is lawful evil. Evil, he knows what he wants to do, but he's got plans. I'm going to get there by doing this, or I'm going to test the waters and doing something wrong because I can get away with it. So I'm going to keep going. Whereas chaotic evil is the hero. I'm going to do this just because I think it'd be fun. Let's see where this goes.
I will disagree with you there. I will say that Tywin is very much lawful evil.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Tywin knows what he's doing. I think that Joffrey is stupid evil, and I think that our hero is chaotic evil.
Chaotic evil.
Is there a category for incompetent
is Joffrey not
evil?
lawful evil? Sorry, I stepped in your.
I think that Joffrey doesn't give a crap about laws. I think he's closer to chaotic evil. If we want to go on that, 9 square spectrum there.
Okay.
Just one that's more competent than the other.
Going back to a previous conversation about Joffrey, about whether or not he takes pleasure in the torture, and it's that the hero of the Revolution, he takes a lot of fucking pleasure in just slamming Theon's face against the door. Like, he got his hopes up, and then so I don't know. I love a good villain. Everybody needs a good villain. Anyway, Tyler.
So my one counterpoint to both Nick and Steven there is our hero there. I don't think he's chaos, really. He has a plan. He has an idea. He knows what he is doing. There is some organization to his madness. He is for Theon's case, as we were going to eventually find out in later episodes, but I mean, you can kind of see the building blocks kind of starting here. He is breaking Theon down into basically nothing. he is slowly working at driving Theon into nothing here, basically, through his plan of constantly building him up, giving him a little bit of hope, and slashing that and taking him straight back down. Gary.
I just was gonna laugh at the fact that like Tyler has to call him the hero as short for the hero. I'm hoping that by the end of the season this guy gets a name, so we can not call him the hero of the revolution. But I guess I might still call him that.
I'm so glad we called him the hero of the revolution. You, I think, called him the hero of the revolution.
Yes. But also, I will say, like, we've talked about the hero of the revolution a lot. I would say on an initial watch of this show, like, those are the scenes that people probably try to fast forward through. Is like, because the payoff is just sadistic, like, Saw-level movie, like, torture.
Yeah.
Like, but, I don't know. I just find it ironic that I've talked about it a lot, just because it's just crazy psychopath level stuff.
Because you're a twisted person, Gary. We get it.
Steven.
No, well, okay. I think that two things. Number one, Tyler, I think that what happens later on shows that although he has reasons for doing some of his things, they tend to be very some of them aren't necessary. And we'll get to some of those points, but they are very, very not necessary what he does to do. The second point for Gary, I think that you hit that actually really well. I didn't even think about that, is how much I really, you pay attention to this guy with the first watch through, and you're like, wow, this is happening. Wow. But that's about it. You are just kind of in shock. You don't know how important all of this is. It's not striking you because how would you know?
I recently rewatched the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, and so I very much have the Joker in my head talking about all these chaos levels. That's fine. I'm just a comparison, but it's in my head. As far as, some people can't be bullied or bargained with, they're just chaos. And so thinking of this, like, I agree with what Steve, you both have very valid points, Steven and Tyler, but I agree more that I don't think that there's really a plan in the sense of what we think a plan is with this hero. Because, he wants to impress somebody, or he's doing what he wants to do because he wants to break someone down. That's not really a plan, that's like a purpose, right? How you do something, to me, is a plan. Like, again, going back to Christopher Nolan's Joker, he has all these great abduction plans, and his long-term goal is this, and how he does that seems very interwoven. Whereas this guy's like, I'm going to take a knife and stab this guy and chop bits off him, and just kind of keep doing that until he seems to squirm and pass out. Like, there's not really a plan in that. It's just something he's doing to him. So to me, it seems very chaotic. And it's absolutely the sadistic, taboo nature of it. It's not something that we see often or hear about or as civilized folk contemplate. So it's something that it's like the first time you see it, you're like, I agree, Steven. This is wow. I can't believe we're watching this, or that it's happening, or that these people were comfortable enough to act it out.
Yeah.
It's on a second watch, you're just like, this dude is totally getting off on destroying this other human being, and that's it's. Yeah, I don't even know how to.
We just wrap this up. This is a long conversation. Last curiosity: was he in the room during it, or did he barge into the room? I didn't really catch that. Like, the hero, did he barge in, or was he just like sitting in the dark in a corner just watching?
I would expect him to have been sitting in a corner watching.
Eating his popsicle.
Very, very much. Yeah, no, he probably was eating a beef stick the entire time.
Eating a sausage, Link.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there's a sausage joke in a later episode. If you know what I'm talking about, it's real bad. Anyway, we should wrap up episode 7 and move forward, unless anyone has anything else.
All right, so we've wrapped up that episode there. Let's move on to episode 8 now. Second Sons. All right, synopsis reads as follows. Daenerys tries to persuade the Second Sons to join her against Yunkai. Stannis releases Davos from the dungeons. Sam and Gilly are attacked by a White Walker, and Sansa and Tyrion wed. So I'm going to start off by paraphrasing. Actually, it's not really paraphrasing. It's a direct quote from Mr. The Hound, saying "fuck Joffrey" and "fuck the Queen." I just love his fucking delivery of that. But to my
Are you going to talk more about the Hound? I had one more good Hound quote
go for it.
from that part, which is that who's riding with her? Crap
Arya.
names. Arya's riding with him, and Arya's like, there's got to be better man out here. I was like, because the Hound's saying like, you don't want to be out here alone. Like, there are terrible people out here, and Arya says, you're the most terrible person, and the Hound says, you must not have met my brother. And that was the one that, like, just on a rewatch, like, knowing that the Hound's brother is a huge asshole, like, that was a good rewatch line. Anyway, back to you, Tyler.
So my one point to touch on here to start with is just Stannis walking down to the dungeons to have a conversation with Davos there. So this is shortly after Melisandre has made her return from her vision quest there, where she's acquired Gendry. But Stannis is walking down there talking to Davos, kind of playing it up like he's trying to follow up with him, get ready to release him and stuff like that. But Davos brings out the good point, which I think is very well stated by him there. Like, Stannis could have came down yesterday or tomorrow there, basically after they've done the deed that they're going to do to Gendry, but he didn't. He came down to talk to Davos because he knew Davos would basically not agree with him and tell him what he's doing is wrong there. So does anyone else kind of see that as what Stannis is trying to do there too? Is he still trying to basically figure out if what he's doing is right?
I think seeing that his possible nephew, even though it's a bastard nephew, is like going to be used like, and he didn't share much love for his brother, but he's already murdered one brother. Like, that's the last bit of family he has other than his wife and his daughter. Like, so that was a line. Like, he didn't realize he had a line, and he was about going to cross another line of, like, despicable human being things. And so I think, yeah, he wanted Davos to sort of course correct, because Davos always, like, even at this point, still believes that he's a good leader. And so he needs a second opinion. So, anyway, Nick? Whoever's next, Nick.
Gary had the same point I had. It's a definite bromance where even though he's mad at Davos, he wants, some sort of, agreeance that I'm doing the right thing, or will you at least, look at this thing I'm doing just so he can have, save some sort of family or familial person in his life. Yeah, I was on the same page as what Gary was thinking.
I think he's also starting to question himself, and I think you've seen this a little bit more and a little bit more. I honestly believe that he's losing a little bit of the fanatical faith. He's starting to question things, maybe not even disagree with them, but so much as just question and try to understand, well, okay, so why is this a thing? Why do we need to? And I think that kind of almost starts with like the scene, was it last episode or 2 episodes ago? I don't remember what episode it was, when he goes and sees his daughter and his wife is just freaking nuts. But he wants to go talk to his daughter. He's counseled against it from basically everyone, but no, he wants to go see his daughter. Why is it, et cetera, et cetera. And he wants to, he's feeling, I think, maybe a little separated. Maybe that something is not entirely correct. That these magical, whatever they are, haven't produced the effect that he wanted yet. And he wants to know why. Like I said, I don't even necessarily believe he doesn't believe in all this still, but he just has questions.
I agree with you guys, and I think he is realizing, like, he's feeling himself drifting away. He's feeling that he doesn't have anyone that's going to tell him the truth, but I don't think he's going. I don't think he's gonna still let it stop him from going anywhere. Like, he wanted to feel like he had tried to talk to somebody, but as you pointed out, he still murdered his brother. Like, he was cool with that. Yeah, it makes him feel bad. He doesn't like it, but he's still gonna talk himself into it in the end.
I would say, going into Steven's point about how he kind of lost his way, which is a good harken back to Robb Stark, who also has lost his way in his, the War of the Five Kings. So he just needed to recenter himself. So anyway, Tyler?
I was going to touch too a little bit on Steven's point about him losing his faith, really. I don't quite think he's there yet. He might be questioning it a little bit more, but he also does have that line to Davos there of like, her God is the one true God. You've seen what she did with the baby, and then what's the thing he references? He references something else there too to basically claim that no, her God has basically done all of this stuff for us so far.
And I just had one more, and this was just a little quip, a little aside. An anti-historical here. What if Robb had had the Onion Knight to lean on? I'm just saying.
Davos is a pretty great guy to talk to.
Right.
I don't think the Onion Knight would have survived in the North. The Northmen are hard men.
And you don't think the Onion Knight is? Onions have layers.
Ogres have layers.
All right. Let's throw it over to Nick to start us off for this episode. What do you got?
Ooh, terrible choice. Thanks, Gary. I defer. I'm going to go to Gary. I want to talk off Gary's points.
Come on, Gary.
I have one or two.
Come on,
notes.
Gary. We're waiting on you.
So we're not going to go. Okay. I had some notes on Daenerys's plot about the initial meeting of the Second Sons, and I feel like maybe you get introduced to the leader of the Second Sons, and I feel like that whole scene and all of those conversations are 100% to make you dislike this guy. Like, there's not a redeeming quality. You haven't seen his battle premise. All you've seen is he is the biggest douchebag biker gang son of a bitch. Like, and so he has power, but no one has ever questioned him. Also, I think it's a soft introduction to Dario Naharis. Is that close to the words that Arya was told?
No.
Valor Morgulis
No.
and Valor
Oh.
Dolores.
I can't spell either of those words, so I thought they were the same.
It's got to work on your languages there. If your fictional languages, Gary, God.
Who knew? Also, going back to the same Daenerys story about the Second Son's revolution, do you think he needed to sneak in to give her the news? Like, that, that he was going to join, the Second Sons were going to join her, and that he murdered all of his all of the generals? Do you think it was for just to make a dramatic entrance? Or do you think it was to ensure that if he had the upper hand, like, what he was saying would be more believable? Like, if he just said, like, I killed these other guys, I'm totally on your side, but, like, maybe there's something to do with, like, having the upper hand. But I just thought that was an interesting, maybe, I guess someone who's read the books, is this how it goes down in the books? Like, how do the Second Sons surrender in the books?
I don't remember that. What I was going to say, though, is I do think it's for a little bit of effect. And I think you have to bring the heads. I mean, you can't just say, hey, I killed them, don't worry. You have to basically show proof, but also that...
Show your work.
Show your work.
Middle school math class, show your work.
Damn right. You don't want points counted off against this grade here. But also, he has to have a little bit of a psychological impact when he does that, because my thought here, and I actually had a question on this, was how do you even trust him? He's a mercenary who killed his own people when he thought it was in his best interest. How do you trust him to be on your side? How do you trust him not to just turn on you in the middle of the battle? And I think that I almost think he uses the psychological, bam, look what I did, cool thing to kind of maybe put that out of people's minds, because the only person that I trust less than a mercenary is a mercenary who's already betrayed someone to help me, because that just means they're twice that untrustworthy.
Steven, I think that's a future plot thread where her initial counsel actually does question him. Spoiler alert, he joins Daenerys. But there is some questioning of him later on.
But not right now, there's not. I maybe I missed it.
Well, the episode ends with him pledging his allegiance to her. Well, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So
in a future plot thread,
scene ends.
her group that she's with does have some butts and heads with him. So I don't think that's fully unresolved, that you really, no one knows if they can trust him.
You're right.
Her motley crew of advisors. Nick, what do you think? You wanted to hear my points. What do you think?
I agree, Gary.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as Steven's not trusting the mercenary. Like we were just talking in the previous episode too, Daenerys is a threat herself, so I don't know how trustworthy other people would be around me, knowing my reputation if all I did was introduce myself and then go ahead and slaughter everybody. So I don't really know if I would go as far as to not trust him. I definitely would think that he's someone willing to do whatever it took to keep himself alive, and talented enough to get the job done. But I don't know if I would go so far as to say that I wouldn't trust him. Yeah, I don't know.
Anything else on those, the second son or the Daenerys conversations?
I didn't have.
I guess my next, not necessarily a topic, but just the one more fun line on a rewatch is the Tyrion and Sansa bedroom scene where he finally just he takes a drink, she takes a drink, we're gonna do this, and then he decides he can't do it. We need to wait. He's and then Sansa says, "What if I never want you to?" And then it flashes back to the camera flashes back to Tyrion, and he raises his wine goblet and says, "And now my watch begins," in reference to the Night's Watch, who have to be celibate for the rest of his life, which is something that he made fun of in earlier seasons about he'd never be able to give up whoring. The whores would be complaining from Dorne to Casterly Rock or something. But I thought that was a fun note. Steven?
A slightly darker point on that. I was actually, this is one of the things that I think the movie maybe glosses over a little bit, makes it a little bit nicer than what would actually happen in real life, historical, context. Because for kings and queens, they would have people in there to make sure that you consummated. So they would, it wouldn't be up to Tyrion if we were talking because everything's brutal medieval, should we say, in this. And in a real brutal medieval, this is the one time where, you would have had some people sitting in the corner there going, all right, get your duty done. And they wouldn't have had too much of a choice. So, I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad that it ends like this, and respect to Tyrion for it. But in the same thing, it's one of the. I'm not sure. I like the scene because it has a happy ending. I don't like the scene because it wouldn't have a happy ending.
That's fair. The way that you propose that sentence that he says, Gary, about "now my watch begins," I took that in a totally different context. I thought that he was giving a nod to her because she is, a very beautiful woman, someone that he would aspire to hopefully one day get the opportunity to be intimate or romantic with. And now my watch begins, I will then begin waiting for you. Now my watch continues to wait for you, or something along that line. I didn't see it as, all right, I guess I'm going to be celibate forever then. I thought it was more it would end on a hopeful kind of context is how I took it.
I guess I took it exactly like Gary did.
Interesting.
Yeah. Nick, to me,
right
over Nick's head.
Well, no. Honestly, when I think of Tyrion, I think of him as sharp-witted, cunning, and brutal to people he perceives as a threat. The people he doesn't, he is kind and compassionate and knows when people who are weak people need nurturing. Like, absolutely, like Steven said, if this were brutal medieval true to form, he could have absolutely said, "Now you're my wife, you're my property. Let's get naked and do it because you have to." But he doesn't end that way. Like you said, he kind of ends with this like cheerful thought and kind of like a toast to her of like, "Well, you've just asserted your own right to do whatever you want to, and so since you're my wife, I'll let you do that." There are couples contemporary nowadays who aren't that cordial to each other. And so I think that it's really a sign of his acknowledgement in her apprehension of being in that relationship. So
Chicken is kind of in between you guys. Like, I didn't think he was good enough. Like, he's willing to wait for her if she's ever interested, and if not, then so be it. I didn't think he was going to stop sleeping with, like, Shay or anyone else.
No.
What Steven said with your point is, yeah, I know that it depended on what country and maybe royalty, but Tyrion's not king.
No, but this
He's
is for
not even a High Lord.
But this is for the rulership of the North. This isn't something that they would take the chance that had been consummated.
The North is equivalent to Casterly Rock, though, in terms of one of the 7 kingdoms. Like, they both could. I don't know. They did have the bedding ceremony, which doesn't always necessarily have to happen, but.
Amanda, your point about like ensuring that it was his heir, that kind of goes back to the Jaime Cersei of like it could be anybody's kid that Sansa has. Doesn't necessarily have to be Tyrion's, but
your boy Joffrey
even made a point about yep, and I was like, oh god. Even
your boy Joffrey does make that point, and I.
Also, in that point, he says a Lannister. So at this point, has Joffrey just accepted that he's a true-born Lannister? Like in everything but title.
Good point.
There's even a point in the books when Joffrey's getting married. We're not there yet.
Joffrey gets married?
No.
I like the
when they're discussing getting married. Sorry, they were discussing getting married. You're right. Mm-hmm. I just remember when Cersei was upset because she had a beautiful Lannister lion cloak, and the Queen of Thorns throws a fit because she goes, "No, you're supposed to use the father's thing, the father's arms, not the mother's." Like, she wants it to be the Baratheon thing. She's like, also, like, why would you just encourage those rumors? They're not rumors. They're real.
Bum, bum, bum.
Spoiler.
I was just going to comment that I like the names that we give people. Like, Joffrey is not Joffrey. He's your boy Joffrey.
We have the hero of the revolution.
Exactly.
You guys are just jealous.
What else did you have here, Gary, since it's apparently on you to keep us going?
Okay, I had jumping towards the end of the episode to the Sam story. The Sam story has kind of the conversation gets interrupted by crows, and so I guess trying not to spoil anything. Like on a rewatch, like I didn't even realize like that's an interesting plot device. Like, anybody have any idea why the crows? Is it somebody like the sightseer Bran who's making the crows squawk? Is it the children of the forest? That's not the right word, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's nothing.
Like, I guess on a rewatch, I was like, I wonder who or what power, or because it's not just like, oh, there's a bird, like there's a predator out there. It's like there's a shitload of crows that are at that point at that second, or is it just a narrative device to like turn the page?
I think they kind of combine a few scenes in there because I love that scene because it shows Sam and Gilly. It's a fascinating scene. It shows him actually he takes down one of the White Walkers. That's fantastic. But he does so in the book too, but not in that way or with those people. Like he doesn't do that with Gilly. It's with like a couple of the others. Some of the from the Night's Watch. Later on, there's also a scene in the books where with the crows. I think they kind of combined it and just used it as a good movie.
As we can say, as the seasons progress, things get a little bit different, and a lot different from the book. So,
yeah, I think they combined it.
Was there some sort of all-seeing eye that was doing that, or the crows where I was like, it just seemed really forced plot to like get him to like.
There was a character in the books that used the crows. But he's not in here exactly like this, so not in the movies.
Anyway, any other thoughts on that? I just had the crows. And then the last bit of that scene was on a rewatch, realizing that why were the White Walkers going to them at that point? It's because on rewatch, I realized that the White Walkers were accustomed to all of Craster's babies being sacrificed. So he was going to get what he thought he was owed, which was like babies. Like that was their peace treaty was like they were going to take all the baby boys. Like that's their peace treaty. So on a rewatch, you're like, oh, well, that's a motivation. And why out of all the places the White Walkers go, they went directly towards them. Anyway, Tyler?
I was just going to specify that, yeah, the male babies there, not all of Craster's kids were sacrificed to the White Walkers. It was just the males. And also, too, Sam the Slayer is now born. All fear Sam the Slayer.
oh, we got another name. Sam the Slayer. I like that
Slayer.
I think this actually comes from the books, if not the show. I think it might be mentioned at some point in time, too, but...
Another interesting point from watching Sam and Gilly was the baby doesn't have a name. She has not named it. And I don't think she said why in the show. In the books, like they don't name, the wildlings don't name their children for at least 2 years because the infant mortality rate is so high.
Interesting.
I think it's also foreshadowing that she doesn't know boy names at all, because she probably has grown up in Craster's Keep, so she's never grown up around boys other than men the Night's Watch.
She asks Sam for a list of them. He starts naming some.
Also, I think it's kind of foreshadowing that the kid does get a name at some point, and these conversations are part of that, and just sort of a plot development of those two characters' relationship. And like that Sam in the early parts of this season like is not Sam the Slayer. He is Sam the servant, like who really has very little value to Gilly at all. Like she doesn't at this point he's a use of circumstance, or like if he died tomorrow, like Gilly would be probably fine, little sad, but probably would move on. Like he's not a protector at all. Like he doesn't know how to make a fire. So
yeah.
Anyway, that is all of my points for at season 3, episode 8.
Imagine Gary with his little notepad when he's watching stuff. Something out of Blue's Clues.
Jot down.
I open a Word document.
Oh, he's fancy.
Yes.
All right, Nick, you're shaking your hand like you want to go next.
No,
I want to hear all Nick's good fucking points. So he had to interrupt me.
You interrupted me. You jumped on me. Oh, I really don't have any points. The same thing that I didn't write down much for this episode. The same things that I had were about just the interactions with Sam and Gilly. I think it's sweet, but at the same time, it does foreshadow a lot about that relationship. The dangers of, everybody's an adult and they're dying left and right. Talking about the mortality rate of infants, they're the least likely couple to survive any of this. And they're in the north, where it's cold. And so all my interactions were about what's the foreshadowing, what do we foresee the greatest danger outside of people for those two. And I just the same comments, foreshadowing that the baby yet doesn't have a name. We don't know if it's going to survive. And, nature aside even, how prepared are those two? Who's Gilly, who's never left Craster's Keep, and Sam, who knows clearly nothing about living outdoors. How well are they prepared to take care of that baby?
All right. Did you want an answer to those questions there, or I guess
Just from you.
just from me? Okay.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Steven.
So most of mine were taken up. I have only one left, and that is Melisandre and her scene with Gendry. Taking Gendry, getting him naked, should we say, then putting leeches on him, as one does, and taking King's blood from him. At that point, Stannis uses those blood-filled leeches to throw into the fire, and he names 3 people. And that's Robb Stark, Balon Greyjoy, and King Joffrey. And I guess, knowing what comes later, I don't know. Do you guys think that this has any... Does the magic work? Or does the magic, kind of seems like it fizzles to me. But Gary's shaking his head yes.
I think it puts gears into motion that circumstances happen, not necessarily the way you would like, but things happen.
Puts the
I
bad
agree
juju
with-
out in the world.
Yes.
I'd agree with what Gary said. We have seen the Lord of Light work magic miracles before, so there is some potential there, I think. It might not seem immediate, but
Yeah, well, I guess it seemed like it fizzled to me, and it almost seems like we at that point relate things that would already have happened to things I'm post hoc ergo propter hoc sort of thing. And
Means after,
Yeah.
therefore because of.
yeah, no, now it's not even a big word this time, it's just Latin. So
Gary,
You
Why are you
post
not
it note a
more-
hawk and
why don't you
you...
know different languages, Gary? Why do you not know fictional and other languages?
Check your
Yeah.
Latin, Gary. God.
post hoc ergo propter hoc means after, therefore, because of. It's a logical fallacy, which means that because something happened after something before, the something before must have caused what came after. And I think
It
that this
sounds
is
like
kind of...
the Latin peoples, they seem like they just needed to learn how to use if-then functions.
That makes you feel better, Gary. He's quoting West Wing. He didn't learn Latin
No,
himself.
No.
Dang.
Everyone who's listening, Stephen is
Wow.
giving the most grimmest face ever about liking the West Wing or something. I don't know.
No, I like the West Wing. Amanda learned this phrase from the West Wing, so she assumed I did as well, but that's okay.
From the West Wing.
Anyways, I believe that this is a... I don't believe the magic works here, and that's, I think, why events continue with Melisandre the way they do later on, and where she's looking for other things.
Do you think that it's a lot more easier to speculate on a rewatch?
I do. Yeah.
I feel like on the initial watch, I probably didn't even connect this because, it doesn't seem like anything really works. Tyler?
My one thought to kind of maybe counter or go against your thought there, Stephen, is the show makes it seem like everything is kind of happening at the same time, But the question is it really actually happening at the same time, or
That's a good point.
did this come before the events that might come later or something like that?
That's a very good point. The show does not do a great job distinguishing that, really. That's a very good point.
Also, Melisandre has shown great power before, but it does seem to take quite a bit of effort and very specific things. Her biggest thing that she's shown is her ability to look into the future or think she's looking into what she sees the future and sometimes interpret it differently. She's seen things before, and then she's been like she was quite confident about certain things happening before that she's like, well, I've seen it. Okay. Well, now you're issuing magic that you say is going to cause that, but if you already saw it happen, therefore you can just keep saying that you caused it if it's going to happen.
True.
Hot take. Maybe Melisandre does not. She has lots of weird witchcraft. Maybe she has no future foresight at all. Like, not spoiling anything, but if you just move forward with the assumption that she thinks she can fortune tell, but she can't, then everything becomes a lot more crazy. Like, she can already know she can make demon shadow babies, and we've already proven that names can the other priest can resurrect a guy. So it is very much at this point, if you're paying attention, that you need to believe that these the god is real, and they are making real believable witchcraft. Yeah. Anyway, that was just my hot take that maybe the fortune telling is nothing and it's a red herring.
I think that's actually a fantastic point. That when you say that actually I had never considered that. I think that's a fantastic point because you're right. She doesn't know when she goes and sees what's his name, the flaming sword.
Eric Dondarrion?
Yeah. And she talks about what is in the afterlife because she doesn't know. And he says, "Oh, there's nothing. It's just blackness." She doesn't know that's going to happen. She doesn't know. There's a lot to be said that she's just maybe going along with events. Maybe she's being worked through with this red god, but is not causing any of this or not actively deciding, "Hey, I'm going to make a smoke baby." It's just happening. And maybe she doesn't have this kind of the foresight, like you say, that she knows everything that's going to happen. Maybe she just knows how to channel the power to her from the red god, and the red god does what the red god does.
The pawn on the chessboard, she's doing things, but she's as a pawn. She's not a higher level in the organization of the red god. She's just a very small piece that helps everything move into place. So.
All right. Was that everything then for you, Steven?
Yeah.
Okay. Amanda, what do you got?
My one was about Gilly and Sam, which we already kind of covered. But one of these two episodes, the other thing I wanted to mention was Marjorie and Sansa have a conversation. Actually, I think it was last episode, so I missed it. But Marjorie brought up some interesting points, and I don't remember this being in the book. I thought this was for the movie. When Marjorie, we've talked about before, is she doing all this to help herself, to be a good person, all of the above at the same time? But she actually tries to give Sansa some helpful advice when, Sansa's now kind of out of her reach. She's going to marry Tyrion. That's what's going to happen. But she tells Tyrion, or tells Sansa, this might not be so bad. He's far from the worst. Rather nice. You don't know what you like. Some women like this, some women like that. You won't know until you find out. Maybe it's okay to give him a chance. Gary?
Or is she playing a Game of Thrones? Because at this point, for her, I think I mentioned this before, her goal is she needs to get Sansa the F out of the capital. Because Sansa being in the capital is a distraction and another piece on the board that doesn't allow her to better control Joffrey or better have control of the realm. Once she heads back to the north, although I think on the grander scale, her grandmother doesn't like that she's marrying a Lannister because that gives the Lannisters more power. I think Sansa not being in King's Landing, maybe after a year or so, Joffrey will forget that, that he really just wants to be a dick to Sansa, because she won't be there anymore. She won't be a distraction. And so that's what she needs. Is she needs to get her out of King's Landing. And maybe it's just she's being nice, but I think there is value to her that Sansa be happy somewhere else.
I do wonder if with Sansa, if she was out of the capital, like, does that mean that Joffrey is only going to pay attention to Marjorie? Does that mean he's not going to have his plaything, so he's going to turn cruel to Marjorie?
Ooh.
Good question.
Or you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Or
the hero of the revolution comes in, frees everyone.
Here, does, like, I don't know. I think that with her out of the capital, there's she can. I think the stakes of her between her and the crown are just Joffrey, and she doesn't have this other woman that's between her and her man. It's like the ex-girlfriend. Honestly, Sansa's the ex-girlfriend. Like, she just needs her out.
To some extent, I'd agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Without spoiling anything, I realized I was gonna, like, speculate and things that might perhaps come to pass. But anyway, Amanda, anything else?
No, I think we got to all the ones that I was thinking about.
All right, so I want to just touch on, to wrap up our episode here, the big event that happens in this episode. Tyrion gets married to Sansa. Joffrey is a dick at the wedding and at the reception. Yeah, yes.
Tywin is a dick too. Like Tywin's like, you need to wed her better, and like basically Tywin's trying to play his own game, and his own game very similar to the previous conversation. Like, as soon as like they're married, Sansa can leave the capital, Tyrion can leave the capital, and that's less things that can go wrong for him. Like,
it's one more
you know what I mean?
uncontrollable
Like,
piece he doesn't have to worry about basically on the board, because while he's got his son under control somewhat, his son could still be a little bit doing stuff that Tywin doesn't think works to further the family interest.
honestly, I think his focus is more changed to like being the hand of the king and controlling Joffrey. Like, and he might come back to Tyrion in a bit about how Tyrion can help being the Lord of the North, but right now they're still at war. Like, Tyrion being the Lord of the North only works like in peacetime. So, like, I think he just needs to get them out of the capital. I think that's Steven?
Well, actually, when you say that, it works if two conditions are met. It works if there's peacetime and if Robb is dead. And that is kind of, I mean, we're kind of, at this point, coming to a crossroads where Tyrion is basically throwing away any diplomatic option. He is basically saying at this point, there will be no negotiation with the North. And yeah, to an extent, they had that before. In terms of, like, yeah, you're at war. It is what it is. But as we've been saying, Robb is kind of losing his focus out there. He's really just fighting for the freedom of the North. This is something that I think Tywin would be very able to see that could be solved through diplomatic negotiations. The fact that he is throwing away that option to have diplomatic negotiations by force marrying one of Robb's sisters is... It should ring alarm bells. What's happening here? Why is he throwing away what is a very big option for him? Because he has, if he really wants to marry off Sansa, he has Sansa all day long, all night long. He has her in custody. Why now? What is the purpose of doing it now?
That's really interesting. I never even thought about that. That like Rob and Catelyn, their goal of going to war was to get their sisters back, or get his sisters back, and like forcibly marrying her off, like as a prisoner, is not really working towards that solution, and kind of puts Rob at in a difficult situation where technically she can't go back to the north either until she's first in line for Winterfell. Interesting. Good point, Stephen.
All right. Anything else anyone wants to touch on for this final moment here? All right.
Long live the hero of the revolution.
Pod for king.
Your boy Joffrey.
Sam the Slayer. All right. So for next time, we will be watching episode 9 and episode 10. Episode 9 is The Reigns of Castamere. And episode
Nice song.
10,
I like that song.
it's got a good ring to it. And episode 10 is Misa. Good stuff coming up. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Have yourself a good one.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a good day.
I just wanted to say the Christopher Nolan Batman series is the best Batman series, and Gary, you can go straight to hell.
I second that opinion. I'm just going to cut this all
No
out.
one
of the
has
podcast
seen.
anyways.
No one has seen Robin Williams as the Riddler, so I withhold judgment that the best Batman movies were never made.
That I'm not even going to get into that point there because
Yeah,
that's just
anyway.
crap. Back to podcast.